Hello and welcome to the Maine Take. My name is Dana Connors. I am the president of the Maine State Chamber of Commerce. And this time every Tuesday, actually every other Tuesday, now that the legislature has gone home for the year, we'll be bringing you this program every Tuesday, like I said, but it's twice a month, not every week. But what hasn't changed are our focus. Our focus is always on the initiatives, the issues, the ideas at work in our state to improve the lives and the livelihood of Maine people. And that certainly is the case today. Today, our program is really about an initiative, but not really. It's really about the people behind those initiatives. They're very special people. They're people that have a very special role that truly make a difference in our lives and our livelihood. But this time, it's about our young people, our future leaders. Yes, the subject is education. And yes, education is a lifelong pursuit. But today, our focus is on those very formative foundational years of K to 12. And our first segment, as we talk with educational leaders, really brings to us the celebration that we all look forward to every year, and that's to acknowledge Maine's current Teacher of the Year. Her name is Kelsey Stoyanova. She's an 8th grade teacher in the language, arts, and writing at Reeds Brook Middle School, as I recall, which is in Hampden. It's RSU 22. She will be joined by Dolly Sullivan, who is the program director of the Teacher of the Year. She is part of the team at Educate Maine. That is a business and education organization that does great work. She also participates and is a major player in another program that I'm familiar with that I think very highly of, which is the Education Leaders Experience Team. She will be followed in our second segment with Courtney Belolan. There we go. I told you, Courtney, that this is always a challenge, is getting the right name, and I just proved why that is so. But Courtney, we're pleased to have with us today, is Executive Director of the Maine Curriculum Leaders Association, a very important role to play in our educational effort, and is one that really looks at what gets taught and how it gets taught. In other words, that is our curriculum. But we're going to begin with Kelsey and the Teacher of the Year. And you've often heard the term, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Well, you watch this video from WABI and you'll know why those words are so very true.
It can be a difficult time for a student. Having a teacher who makes them feel important and heard can make all the difference. That's what Maine's 2022 Teacher of the Year does. I was in Hampden this morning for a surprise ceremony honoring Kelsey Stoyanova.
Congratulations, Kelsey Stoyanova. You are Maine's 2022 Teacher of the Year.
Reeds Brook Middle School held its first assembly in a year and a half Wednesday morning, and for good reason.
One student told us that Ms. Stoyanova makes the classroom feel like a home. She creates a family.
Before I was in Ms. Stoyanova's class, I would not have even considered speaking in front of all you guys. It's just not something I would have done, so thank you for helping me find my voice.
She provided a safe space for anyone who was in need of one. She gave us the ability to be vulnerable and then come out stronger as a result.
She made me excited to come to school each day, even in such a strange year due to COVID.
She shared a space in which her students could express themselves in comfort and without fear.
You always made us feel like our voice was important, no matter the subject, and you made it clear that the classroom was a safe space.
They say Kelsey, who reads everything, possesses a superpower in matching books to students, using those stories as a way to get through.
Sharing stories shows us that we are never alone. Stories, whether from a book, a lesson, a memory, or created in conversation, show us the weight of our words. the power of our voice.
The 2021 Penobscot County Teacher of the Year moved on from that group of 16 to being one of 3 finalists, now ultimately being honored.
From the moment you talk to her, she talks about how engaged her students are in her classroom, how important they are to the decision-making process, how her role is to help facilitate their learning and their voices, and she's just a strong advocate for her students, and that's what really helped her stand apart from the other teachers.
I just work really hard to ensure that these kids have a safe space when they come to school, and to know that they heard me, and they've taken that to heart, and they'll continue to take that to heart no matter where they go. It means the world to me.
Kelsey will now move on to the National Teacher of the Year contest.
Well, this word seems inadequate after having viewed that particular clip, but Kelsey, congratulations. That's an incredible recognition, distinction, and honor to be a recipient out of 400 that started the process over a course of a year to be the one selected amongst all of them. Congratulations. It's a wonderful, wonderful distinction.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me here today.
Yeah, I know part of your, well, first of all, was this a total surprise? And even if it wasn't, to hear those students speak so warmly and passionately about your presence and your guidance, and that those types of gifts that teachers bestow upon their students, what was your reaction?
I think that I spend every year, but especially in the last 2 years where students have had such a different educational experience, really amplifying student voice. And so to have them then take what I tried to teach them and show me that now it was my turn to use my voice to amplify their stories, the stories of my colleagues, the stories of education in our state, really, going through this process with my students taught me so much about what it means to be a teacher. And they really, truly were my teachers through that process. One particular thing that I just want to bring up is one part of the process is we had to do a classroom video. And I actually asked one of my students to record that video for me. And I learned so much about him as a student and about me as a teacher through watching how his eyes viewed my lesson. And that was just an incredibly remarkable experience for me. So overall, I just think it's so important to really uplift what these kids have been able to do all the time, but in the last 2 years especially, and how they've really grown and shown their learning despite the odds and what COVID has brought out for us.
Yeah, in the toughest of times, to get that type of reaction has to be marvelous to hear it and to know it's about you. That's wonderful. You mentioned this. I know that part of your function is to elevate the voices and the work of the educators of our state. What's your first few months? I mean, you were selected in late last year for 21 for the year 22 that we're now in, and you serve this calendar year. What's it been like for the first few months now that we're into May, our 5th month? What's been your function? What have you done?
Yeah, so quite a bit, actually. It's been really busy lately, but really the basis of everything I've done has been about sharing stories, like you've mentioned, and seeking out different ways that I can use this position to get teacher stories, perhaps through me, but also bringing in other county teachers of the year, other colleagues that I have, to the metaphorical table, for lack of a better way to put it, to amplify the positive things that are happening in our schools. I think that's always something that we can do more of, whether we're talking with Senator King and Senator Collins, which I've had the opportunity to do, talking with Commissioner Macon and Deputy Commissioner Shuda, talking with leaders at our local universities, really bringing in different voices from across the state to have these opportunities has been a lot of what I've done. I recently got to go to DC, where I went to the White House. I never thought that's something that I'd be able to do or say. And just talking with different teachers from across the United States and representatives from Massachusetts, from Maine, and really bringing about what wonderful things are happening in Maine classrooms, but also our needs. And I am just so proud to be able to bring all of the different perspectives, because yes, I might be the voice that's talking to you right now and talking to these different people, but it's not about my voice. It's about using my voice to amplify the stories of others.
Well, that's extremely well said, because it is about being that ambassador, that voice for education, and particularly to pick up on a point that you made. There is a very positive story to be told. We heard a lot of the issues associated with the pandemic, and I want to speak to you in a moment about that. But truthfully, there's so much positive in our educational system and with our teaching teachers today, that to bring that to life is so uplifting. And boy, speaking of the positive, at the last 2 years that has been part of our life is nothing but very much needed, and I commend you for that. What is it for the rest of half of the year? When does your competition at the national level take place?
So that's already happened, and we have a wonderful National Teacher of the Year, Mr. Kurt Russell from Oberlin, Ohio. He is going to be he already is a wonderful representative for education across the United States. When we were in DC, he was honored and recognized, but we all had the opportunity to talk with U.S. Secretary of Education, Dr. Miguel Cardona, and the Deputy Secretary as well. And, Kurt Russell is just going to be phenomenal and exactly what this nation needs to propel education forward. Secretary Cardona said that teachers are the face of America's recovery. And I think Kurt will be a great person to lead that charge, but he also, talks to all of us. We have a group chat going where he seeks out our input all the time. And so I think that just that network, right? So as in Maine, we're fortunate to have the County Teacher of the Year program, where there are 16 every year that are chosen, narrowed down to that one, which means I have my own network here in Maine to rely on, to get feedback from, which I can then push to the national level, push to the National Teacher of the Year. And it's just such a great way to network at all ends of our state and all ends of our nation.
Yeah, speak, if you wouldn't mind, about this 2-year period in which your classroom was sometimes over television through remote learning capacity, and at times it would be in the classroom. I know it had to be a challenge, but speak to that experience and how you coped with it.
Yeah, I think everyone would agree that it was a challenge, because we all want our students in front of us every single day to be able to make the most of their learning. But what I will say is it really highlighted the need for getting to know our students as individuals, not only for their academic needs, but their personal interests and activities and those types of things. Getting them just face to face with us when they were remote, are still sometimes remote, depending on, even right now. Knowing them as individuals and who they are and what they like, what they dislike, what will get them onto the computer every day, that's incredibly important. And so it highlighted the need for relationships with our students to get them engaged in what we were doing. It also highlighted the need, and I'm sure Courtney will talk about this later, for giving students choices of how they can demonstrate their learning. That's one of my core values as a teacher, and how I get my students engaged in language arts is giving them options. Certainly, we might be working with similar themes or ideas, and we're definitely working with the same standards, but in terms of offering them opportunities to read something different or create something different. And that's what's going to keep them engaged and keep them going. And that's part of showing students that advocating for what they need and for their education can start at a young age. It doesn't have to be once they're in high school or once they're getting jobs that they advocate for themselves. They can advocate for themselves in elementary school and middle school and beyond, and just develop those skills on and on. So I think the pandemic really showed us that kids, A, have the ability to do that, but B, should have the opportunity to do that.
Wonderful. I got to ask you a question before I let you go, because I know you have classroom responsibilities in about 15 minutes. But I wanted to ask you, and this is probably very revealing of me and perhaps a shortcoming I may have had. So let me get that right out front. But you teach 8th grade, you teach language arts and writing. And when I put myself back to those many years ago, and think about what my interest may have been, I can't say it was language arts and writing. How do you, as a teacher, I mean, just listening to your enthusiasm sets you apart, and clearly your passion for both your students as well as your teaching. So there must be some magic that you possess to get those young people so interested in something that proves to be very valuable as we grow older, language arts and writing. What is that magic you possess?
Well, first of all, at the very basic structural level, I tell my students from the beginning of the year, our essential question for the year is, what is what we read teach us about ourselves and the world around us? I think anytime that you can connect a book, a story, a poem to the world around us, you're going to get kids involved, because naturally they're consuming so much in any given day that an opportunity to talk about what they're consuming, to write about, to create about what they're consuming is going to be something they're going to take on. Aside from that, though, it really does go back to this idea of choice. And it sounds so simple, but it truly is. It's that simple. Giving them the opportunity, no matter what we're doing, to make decisions about what they learn, how they learn, and then what they do with their learning is really the recipe for success in any level, elementary, middle, high school. I have, this classroom, and I wish I could show you my whole classroom, but my classroom isn't filled with decor that I saw online or picked up from a store. It's filled with, and you can see an example behind me now, it's filled with my students' creations. So giving kids ownership over their learning, over their classroom community, over where we go from here, the timeline. Certainly I have structures in place. I have standards, I have units, I have all of that. But the more that a student feels like they have opportunity and choice, the more that they're going to take that opportunity and choice and run with it, because they're in charge of where they go from here. And I think that ultimately that's the magic of how you get kids engaged.
Yes, indeed it is. And that is great. I know I have to let you go, but I do so with deep appreciation and gratitude to you and to all of the other teachers in our state who really have the most important job dealing with our most precious young, our future leaders. It's where those hopes and dreams are made. It's where the ambitions, the aptitude, and the attitude takes place. And on the ride up this morning to work, I was listening to public radio, and they were talking about education. And one of the speakers said, the teacher is that guiding hand that's placed on your shoulder that helps create for you what is to come. And later on in life, you still feel that hand on your shoulder, and you never forget the teacher that made that difference. Those were such true words. And, even though I don't want to tell you when I was in the 8th grade, but it is true. Those words are very, very true. So I thank you. I appreciate all that you do, and certainly congratulations on this outstanding honor. There is no question. After a few minutes of interviewing you, I can see why you were selected.
Thank you so much.
No, you're more than welcome. Well, I'm pleased to welcome somebody that I know pretty darn well. And I think that person that did the clip, Dolly may know pretty well as well. But Dolly Sullivan is my next guest. Dolly is the program director of this incredible program. And Dolly, thank you for being with us today. I know you've been an educational advocate, like I said at the introduction, since 1998. And that is remarkable with all the things that you've done. But I want to talk about that in a moment. But let's begin with what we've just heard. We only touched on the process, but when you begin with 400 candidates, you narrow them down to 16, which was just like last week. And then, 8, and then 3, or whatever that number is, until later in the year, around October, the Kelsey or her successor are chosen to be the leader for that next year. That's remarkable. Tell us a bit about that process, because I can just assume that it's a rigorous process, and I'd be anxious for you to share what some of that might be with our viewers.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Dana. Yeah, that video always gives me cold chills. 2 of my favorite people, my son Brian and Kelsey. So, and now that after you've heard her you can see why she makes us so proud. So she's quite remarkable. So, it is the Maine Teacher of the Year program is unique, and it is a rigorous process. It's one of the most rigorous. It's designed by teachers for teachers, and yes, it's a recognition program, Dana, but it is more of a professional learning program.
Mm-hmm.
It's takes about 9 to 10 months from the time they're nominated, they opt in, and we ask them to really look and share about their classroom practices. And I think about if I were to have somebody scoring my office and my office practices and the way I run the program, and it might be a little intimidating, but they do that. They're willing. What they do is they reflect on what they do in the class, their philosophy. And, there's a lot of writing. They share with us a videotape of their classroom instruction. And each one of, from that, we narrow it down to 8. And then those 8 semifinalists give keynote speeches at the University of Maine, and that will happen in July. And from that, we narrow it down to 3. We do site visits. We have our site review panel. We spend an entire day at their school, and then they have a final interview. And, in some states, they just show up and you're the Teacher of the Year. But that is, we've asked some of the legacy county Teachers of the Year, said, should we do something different? Should we make this easier? And they said, no. This is a learning opportunity for them. So
no, but you know what, you spoke convincingly as to why it's wonderful to celebrate it, and it's very meaningful for all of us when you do celebrate. You're reminded how important their role is in our young people's lives. Words can't express it, but at the same time, just hearing you outline the process really does speak to why it's also a learning process for those individuals who apply, and the network that they establish when they are either selected as county leaders or on the national stage. Yeah, it's both, and it's well deserved. Let me ask you this. I've been very proud of the fact that education community and the business community over the years, more recently than the past, have really come together because there is that need to have that partnership, that relationship between business and education. So they communicate, they understand each other, what the needs are, and so forth. Am I correct? That's exactly what you have in place with the Maine Teacher of the Year program, that business support?
It is, and ours is, and thank you for letting me speak to that, because ours is a unique program. And, as you know, Educate Maine is our foundation is built on business and education partnerships. And so we have, we're fortunate to work. The Maine Teacher of the Year program is a program of the Maine Department of Education, but we administer it. And we do that in partnership with the State Board of Education and also the Maine County and State Teacher of the Year Association. But we could not do this without our corporate funders. We have longtime champions of this organization. We have Bangor Savings Bank, and Peter Geiger has been a champion since the 90s. Hannaford has been, I think that they first started funding this program in 1994. We have Dead River and Unum and the Maine Lottery and the Sullivan family, wonderful family from Bucksport and Chicago. Truly believe in this program as well. And so we're fortunate that we can offer Kelsey, the Teacher of the Year, and the County Teachers of the Year, these professional learning opportunities to come together, because we're really building a network of teacher leaders around the state. And they're quite remarkable. Oftentimes we will, be looking at a policy issue, and we're so fortunate that we are able to say, give us your advice and counsel on this. How would this impact you? And it's, there's a lot of expertise out there. So.
Yeah, and it's the way we like to see things done, where people do work together and make sure that all things are considered and discussed, and you come up with a much better product. Good work.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. This may seem like an unfair question, so your answer will be probably much better than mine. But when I heard Kelsey and when I think of the teachers that were just recently selected to be county representatives, and when I read about some of them, there were certain traits that might exist with all of those candidates that bring to life their outstanding contributions or skill or whatever it may be. Did you notice in the selection process, those that are picked, is there a common trait or traits that stand out that kind of unite them all?
I think there is. I mean, they're all very different. They all bring something very different to the process. And we get to see that through their writing. But the things that we see is, number one, they're willing to take a risk. Oftentimes teachers don't want to be in the limelight. They just want to be in their classroom and do their thing with their students. But so someone has nominated them and they said, you know what, we're going to do it. We're going to take that risk. And they're modeling for their students. So they're willing to step outside their comfort zone. They're willing to, they're willing to make that extra effort, and they all are, just because they accepted their nomination, but it's a lot of work. Like for Kelsey, it's really like having a second full-time job.
Yeah.
And the thing that is the most common is their commitment to the profession and their students. We run them through an exercise, and we're actually going to start putting some on social media, why I teach. And you will see the common theme there. It is the importance of building those relationships with their students. And that's, it just becomes so evident that this is, yes, it's their profession, they're experts, but they all have that common thread of the commitment to their students.
Yeah, you spoke of a word, and it was extremely well expressed, and I thank you for that answer. And you spoke of something that you may instinctively think you need to do it, but the use of the word relationships between the student and the teacher is a lesson at that level that applies almost to everything in life. When I think of, as you know, I'll be retiring at the end of this year after about 30 years. And when I'm asked about the position and those 30 years, what is important, boy, relationships really jump right to the top, because dealing with legislators or dealing with the public, it's all about building that trust, that relationship. And it even goes and speaks to the classroom, like you said, an important lesson in that, to be sure. One last question I want to ask, unless there's something you'd like to bring to it. The pandemic has hit the educational community in ways no different, perhaps, than whether you're in business or other occupations. And so the Department of Education and Educate Maine have stepped up, and some call it the guest teacher initiative, others call it the guest school staff member initiative. Either one kind of applies to the same calling out, trying to solicit people to volunteer to address some of the needs that aren't being met today in education. Did I describe that correctly? And speak to that if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, you did. It's guest teacher, guest school staff initiative. It actually, this idea has been percolating. It actually started with the 2020 Teacher of the Year, Heather Whitaker. She was at an Educate Maine board meeting, but she couldn't fully participate because there were no substitutes. And so she shared with our board the crisis, the sense of urgency that there is in our schools because there aren't any subs. And when she got done, it was a passionate speech, as only Heather can do. Our board chair, Cliff Grime, and Gary Merrill, and Barry Driscoll from WEX, and Lisa Sullivan said, Lisa from Harriman said, we can do something. This is what Educate Maine should be looking into. And so we worked with the Department of Education, and Kelly DeVoe worked with the the IT folks, and they developed this 9-step process. It really just made things a lot easier for people to apply to be a substitute teacher. And it's not just a teacher. It can be the classroom. It can be the kitchen, bus drivers, playground. But the schools need help. But to get there, you have to, there has to be a background check, and there's an application process. So we really streamlined the process. The department, the Maine Department of Education, will now reimburse people. So I'm going to do a little plug here. We still need to have substitutes, guest staff people. You will get reimbursed the $55 plus the $15 for the background check and the fingerprinting, and that ends on June 30th. So let's think ahead to the fall. Get your, do your training online, all developed by Heather Perry, the superintendent in Gorham, and get ready. And maybe you can be a substitute in the fall. We're still going to need subs. And so it really was an ideal, once again, a partnership with the Maine Department of Education and Educate Maine. And our superintendents. And so I'm really proud of the fact that we're able to, Maine is such a state that we can do that. And we're so fortunate that you can call Heather Perry at any time and say, can you build these 3 training modules? And she's like, okay. So, yeah.
That's Heather Perry.
That's
sure.
Heather.
Yeah, it sure is. Well, Dolly Sullivan, thank you so much. And I congratulate you, because it takes a lot of effort to put on the Maine Teacher of the Year program, but also to do the many wonderful things that you do. So since 1998, you've been a strong advocate, and it shows in what you have to say and the enthusiasm for which you say it. So thanks a million. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, and good luck. And I'm sure that our paths are going to cross again. So
I hope so.
All right. Thanks so much.
Take care. I am pleased to welcome for our next segment, Courtney Belolan. I got it right this time, Courtney.
You got it that time.
Please forgive me for fracturing it the first time around.
Of course.
Yeah, I am pleased that you're on, because you're going to be talking about an issue that fundamentally so connects with our previous guests, so important to the success of education. And I'm dying for you to share it with our viewers. You are the executive director of the Maine Curriculum Leaders Association. It was formed in 2008, as I remember reading about. And I'd love to have you begin by sharing with us, who are members of the Curriculum Leaders Association, and what is their function as individuals?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I joined MCLA in 2019 as the executive director. And since then, one of my goals has really been to increase the visibility of our organization as well as our members, because we really are an integral piece of the Maine education community and a really important person or role to know about for the wider community, as you talked about kind of the growing partnerships between business and education. The curriculum leaders are people who should be important, integral members of those teams when those discussions happen. So our members, we call ourselves the Curriculum Leaders Association, because unlike other positions in school districts like principals or superintendents, there is not really one job title that covers the role of the person who is in charge of managing and coordinating the curriculum and professional learning. So in general, that is what a curriculum leader does. They manage the curriculum and professional learning. So everything, as you said earlier, what gets taught, how it gets taught, and then also how we know the learners are learning what we're hoping that they learn. So it's a big role. Our members come from across the state. We have members that represent over 100 school districts, every single county. We have assistant superintendents in districts, can be the person responsible for curriculum management. We have people who are called curriculum directors or curriculum coordinators, or directors of teaching, learning, and assessment, or even chief academic officers, a new title I'm starting to see. And then we also have building principals in districts where there is not a central administrator responsible for curriculum management. It can fall to principals. And then in 2017, we brought under our umbrella instructional coaches. This is a growing position in the state of Maine. And the best way to think about them is they are the embedded professional learning guru for schools. They work directly with teachers in the buildings to help them really apply professional learning that they have gone and experienced, and then turn around and apply it right in their schools. So that's what our members look like.
And the association, I think you pretty much have addressed their function, their purpose, and how they go about setting broad standards and what to teach, how to teach, and how to hold different teachers or other parts of educational system accountable through assessments. Is that accurate, or does that need to be modified?
I would modify it a little bit and say that often the curriculum administrators are a part of the teacher accountability team, but it is not that piece. Teacher accountability is not really their responsibility, but certainly assessment. So if you think about the state assessment system and then local assessment systems and practices, often falls to the curriculum leader to manage and nurture that.
That was very helpful, that modification, because it needed to be made. Let me ask you this. You mentioned the Maine Education Association and the Maine Principals Association, and then you have yours. Was yours born out of and formed because it needed to complement with me, the other two, or was there something not being done that felt that needed to be done? Maybe they're the same question, just expressed differently. But talk about your formation and how it interrelates with the other two that I mentioned.
Yeah, so MCLA was formed in 2008, like you mentioned earlier, and it came out of a need for there to be much stronger collaboration and communication between the districts and the DOE around what's getting taught, how it's getting taught, how it's getting measured. And especially for there to be more of a local focus on those discussions and that work. So that was the original impetus for the organization to be founded. As far as my partner organizations, as I call them, I work very closely with MPA, with MSSA, and MEA and MADSEC. All of us are fantastic collaborators, and I think complement is really the right word. We each have our niches and our strengths, and so we're able to support one another and then rely on one another for information and help. And we make a wonderful team, all of our organizations.
Yeah, I can believe. So the Leaders Association, the Curriculum Leaders Association of Maine really is a learner-centered design curriculum process. And when I did I heard you, when I previously spoke with you here at the chamber, I heard you mention that. And when I checked it out, I found, because I wasn't aware of what that meant. I'm going to ask you to explain that. But when I looked at behind the curtain, so to speak, I found that there are three basic types of curriculum design. One is subject-centered, one is problem-centered, and the other is learner-centered. Distinguish those, if you would, particularly the learner. How that?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure, happy to do that. So at MCLA, we say that our purpose, like our slogan, is that we champion policies and practices that enhance teaching and learning. And for us, that means being learner-centered. So when we talk about being learner-centered, we mean that it's taking the stance of keeping the voice and the needs of learners central to all decision-making. And so that can be decision-making in the classroom about instruction and assessment, and that can also be systemic-wide decision-making around staffing, around schedules. It can go everywhere. I think that's really interesting that the resource you found broke curriculum design into those three areas. we would argue that learner-centered fits everywhere. You can have a very content-focused class, right? A specific science class, for example, like biology, and still incorporate learner-centered practices. Kelsey spoke brilliantly and is a fantastic example of what learner-centered practices actually look like in a classroom, right? She talked about bringing in choice and voice. And so a lot of the work we promote, or the policies and practices we talk about, go towards that. So the idea of nurturing agency, what Kelsey talked about with them being able to make decisions about their own learning. So if you think about it, it's a stance of nurturing agency in learners so that they can create their own futures, right? Rather than us preparing them for the unknown future, which is what we hear a lot. A learner-centered philosophy prepares learners to create that future. So it's about giving them decision-making skills, project management skills, as well as content knowledge and social emotional learning skills, everything that, as we hear from our business colleagues, all of those needed skills.
Well, having heard you explain that, I would agree that the learner center does or is inclusive of the subject center as well as the problem centered, because it is about the voice and the choice, as you mentioned and Kelsey emphasized. So
yes.
Is there, I want to talk a bit about the DEI effort, because I understand from having read something about your organization that you are deeply embedded in trying to help in this regard. But is there anything else regarding the Curriculum Leaders Association or their issues that you'd like to bring forward?
I think that the one thing I would say is that Maine is an incredible state. Dolly shared a little bit about just, the uniqueness of our Teacher of the Year program. But I think you can see that throughout our education community. We've always been a very innovative state. We've always been a state that embraces innovation in our methods and in our schools. And we are here to support the education community and continuing to do that. And part of that is embracing diversity, equity, and inclusion work.
You're right.
Yeah.
Well, when we started the show, we had that brief introduction before the show actually began. I said it usually takes 30 to 40 minutes, and truthfully, we've lived up to that expectation really quite well. But the three of you have been marvelous guests, and I can't thank you enough. You do great work, and you are a critical part of that team that has been heart and soul of our program today. So thank you so very much, Courtney. And every time I see you from now on, I am going to pronounce your last name just so I get that firmly implanted in my brain. So thanks for being a guest. It means a lot.
Thank you so much.
Well, that is our program for today. And the takeaway from today's program really reminds me so much that if there's ever a better example of an area of responsibility, of undeniable responsibility, where it takes a team to be successful, it's education at all levels, I'm sure. But clearly today, brought forward is that necessity at K-12. And that team means that at some point you need to come together, whether you are the educators themselves, whether the administrators of education, where it's a curriculum of what you teach and how you teach it. Yes, and the business leaders of our state and parents. But you also have to stay together and work together. Pandemic has proven the value of that statement and that effort. You heard Kelsey speak of how they addressed it, the challenges they faced, and how they were able to overcome it. What is the return of investment on all that commitment that we've just heard in the past 40 minutes? Well, the commitment and return on that investment is pretty clear, because those young people that are being taught, that are being enabled, encouraged, are the foundation. It is their formative years where hopes and dreams are made, where attitudes are formed and ambition and aptitudes are kindled. And you know what? I think it was First Lady Hillary Clinton back in the mid-90s when she said it takes a village to raise a child, to educate a child. Well, that is true. And it does take a team, it does take a village, but the heart and soul of that team or that village are our teachers. It's not saying it well enough, and it should be said with more thought perhaps, but the sincerity of saying congratulations for all who are nominated to be Teacher of the Year is pretty darn spectacular. You are incredible in the success that you provide for our young people as they look to their future. And I want to thank, whether you're one of those nominated or not, all teachers in our state, because your role is so fundamental. You are that guiding hand on our young people's shoulders that as we grow older, that guiding hand still remains and you're never forgotten. That I know to be true because I live it. You truly are doing God's work, and we thank you for it. That is our show for this week. In 2 weeks' time, we hope to see you right back here on Tuesday as we take on another issue of importance to our people of the state of Maine. Until then, as we often close out our show with these words, take care of yourself and take care of one another. Until then, we'll see you.